Sometimes, the biggest test of your character comes when nobody would blame you for making the wrong choice. Claire Bennett stood frozen in the middle of the crowded sidewalk, gripping the folded eviction notice so tightly that the paper had started to wrinkle in her hand. The cold Manhattan wind pushed against her thin gray sweater as people rushed past without looking at her twice. Taxis honked. Steam rose from the street vents. Somewhere nearby, a siren echoed through the city. But Claire barely heard any of it. All she could hear was her landlord's voice repeating inside her head. 48 hours, Claire. If the rent isn't paid by Friday morning, you and your son are out. Her chest tightened as she glanced down at the small bottle of asthma medication inside her purse. The pharmacy sticker showed the refill date she had already missed 3 days ago. She swallowed hard and checked her phone again. $12.64 left in her bank account. That was all. Not enough for rent. Not enough for medicine. Not enough for groceries. Her 7-year-old son, Noah, was waiting at school right now, probably pretending not to cough so his teacher wouldn't worry again. Claire quickly wiped the corner of her eye before anyone could notice. Crying wouldn't help. It never did. She adjusted the strap of her worn handbag and hurried toward the bus stop, already late for her second shift at the diner downtown. Then suddenly, something caught her attention near the edge of the curb. A black leather wallet. Expensive. Thick. Heavy enough that it had partially fallen open against the concrete. Claire slowed down. People walked around it without noticing. A businessman stepped inches away from it while staring at his phone. A young couple passed by laughing. Nobody stopped. Claire looked around carefully before bending down to pick it up. The leather felt soft and impossibly expensive in her hands. She hesitated for a moment, then opened it slightly. Her breathing stopped. Stacks of $100 bills filled nearly every compartment. Thousands of dollars. More money than she had seen in years. Her fingers trembled as she stared at the cash. Rent. Medicine. Food. School clothes for Noah. Every problem crushing her life suddenly seemed to have an answer sitting inside her hands. Then she noticed a photograph tucked behind one of the card slots. A little girl smiling beside an older man in a navy suit. The photo looked worn, like it had been carried for years. Claire's expression softened for just a second before reality crashed back into her mind. A loud cough suddenly echoed from across the street, reminding her of Noah. She closed the wallet quickly and looked around again. Whoever lost this probably hadn't even noticed yet. Or maybe they had. Her heartbeat grew louder with every passing second. Claire. A voice called from behind her. She turned to see Mia, one of the waitresses from the diner, stepping off the bus with a coffee in hand. Mia glanced down at the wallet and raised her eyebrows. Please tell me that's yours. Claire shook her head slowly. Mia leaned closer after seeing the cash inside. Oh my God. Claire immediately closed it again. I need to find whoever dropped it. Mia stared at her like she had lost her mind. Claire, are you serious right now? You literally just got evicted. Claire didn't answer. Mia lowered her voice. Rich people lose money every day. People like us don't get miracles twice. Claire looked back at the wallet. The city noise faded into the background again. Her hands tightened around the leather. For the first time in months, she could actually breathe without fear about tomorrow. One decision. That was all it would take. Keep walking, and Noah would have a home. Then suddenly, a black SUV slowly rolled past the corner across the street. Inside, a man wearing a dark coat watched her carefully from behind tinted windows. And Claire had no idea that her next choice was about to change both of their lives forever. Claire stood motionless on the sidewalk as the black SUV disappeared into traffic, unaware that the man inside had not taken his eyes off her for a single second. Across the street, Ethan Carter leaned back quietly in the rear seat, his expression unreadable as the driver slowed near the corner. Do you want me to circle back again, sir? The driver asked softly. Ethan did not answer right away. His eyes remained fixed on Claire through the tinted window. He watched the way she held the wallet against her chest instead of stuffing it into her bag. He noticed the hesitation in her face, the exhaustion in her posture, and the fear she was trying desperately to hide. Most people failed the test within 30 seconds. Some walked away immediately. Some pretended to look for the owner while secretly taking cash first. Others justified it to themselves before they even reached the next block. Ethan had seen every version of dishonesty imaginable over the past 2 years. That was exactly why he started doing this in the first place. One more pass, Ethan finally said. The SUV slowly turned the corner again. Ethan loosened his tie slightly and glanced at the second phone resting beside him. A security assistant had already sent updates from nearby cameras. Female subject. Approximately 30 years old. No criminal history. Works 2 jobs. Single mother. Ethan frowned slightly. Single mother? He muttered. The assistant nodded from the front passenger seat. Her name is Claire Bennett. She lives in Queens with her son. 7 years old. Noah Bennett. Ethan looked back out the window again. Claire was now standing beside the bus stop talking to another woman while gripping the wallet tightly in both hands. How late on rent? Ethan asked calmly. The assistant checked his tablet. 3 months behind. Ethan gave a faint nod, but said nothing else. Wealth had changed the way people looked at him long ago. At first, they admired him. Then they wanted something from him. Then eventually they lied to him. Business partners. Friends. Even the woman he once planned to marry. 5 years earlier, Ethan had trusted people too easily. Back then, he still believed loyalty could not be bought. He learned otherwise the day his ex-fiancée secretly sold information about his company during a merger negotiation worth hundreds of millions of dollars. The scandal nearly destroyed everything he built. Since then, Ethan trusted contracts more than people, numbers more than promises. His own lawyer once joked that Ethan treated honesty like an extinct species. Maybe he did. That was why these experiments fascinated him so much. Money revealed people faster than words ever could. Sir, the assistant interrupted carefully. There is something else. Ethan looked up. The boy was hospitalized twice this year for asthma complications. Medical debt is part of the eviction case. Ethan's jaw tightened slightly. He looked out the window again just in time to see Claire glance down at the wallet before quickly looking away, almost ashamed of her own thoughts. He recognized that expression instantly. Desperation. The kind people tried to hide because they thought it made them weak. But Ethan knew desperation changed good people. Sometimes permanently. The SUV slowed near the curb while Ethan continued watching her. You know what usually happens next? The driver said quietly. Ethan nodded once. He did know. Most people kept the money after enough pressure. They always found a reason. Survival. Debt. Family. Bills. And honestly, Ethan could not even blame them anymore. New York was expensive. Cruel sometimes. Especially to people already struggling to stay afloat. But something about Claire felt different. She did not look excited when she found the wallet. She looked guilty, like even considering the money hurt her. Ethan watched as she suddenly pulled out an old flip phone from her purse and typed something quickly. A few seconds later, she pressed the phone against her ear. Hey, sweetheart, she said softly once someone answered. Ethan could not hear Noah's response through the glass, but Claire's face immediately softened. I will pick you up after work, okay? And yes, I promise we will still have movie night tonight. She paused, forcing warmth into her voice. Everything is going to be okay. Ethan stared at her silently after the call ended. Because for some reason, he had the strange feeling that Claire Bennett did not believe those words anymore. The bus ride downtown felt longer than usual as Claire sat near the back, clutching the wallet inside her handbag like it was something dangerous. Every sharp turn made her glance down nervously, half expecting someone to accuse her of stealing it. Outside the fogged windows, Manhattan blurred into streaks of yellow taxis, crowded sidewalks, and glowing storefronts preparing for the evening rush. Across from her, 2 teenagers laughed over expensive shopping bags while a businessman in a tailored coat complained loudly into his phone about a delayed flight to Chicago. Claire lowered her eyes. It amazed her how people could be frustrated over things that felt so far removed from survival. She slowly opened her purse again and stared at the edge of the black wallet. $8,000. Maybe more. Her stomach twisted immediately. She shut the purse again before anyone noticed. Keep it together, she whispered softly to herself. But the truth was, her mind had already started doing the math. 3 months of rent. Noah's medication. The overdue electric bill. Winter clothes for Noah before the temperature dropped again. For the first time in months, there was a possible way out sitting inches away from her. The thought made her feel ashamed almost instantly. 20 minutes later, Claire rushed through the back entrance of the Midtown diner where she worked evenings. The smell of coffee and fried onions filled the narrow kitchen, while waitresses moved quickly between tables carrying trays. You are late, her manager, Denise, called out while wiping menus near the counter. Claire apologized quickly and tied her apron around her waist. Train problems? Denise asked without looking up. Claire hesitated. Something like that. Before she could move toward the dining area, her phone vibrated inside her pocket. The school number flashed across the screen. Panic immediately hit her chest. She answered so fast she nearly dropped the phone. Hello, Miss Bennett, the school nurse said gently. Noah had another coughing episode during recess today. He is okay now, but his inhaler is almost empty. Claire closed her eyes for a moment. I know. I am picking up a refill tonight. The lie left her mouth automatically. All right, the nurse replied kindly. Just make sure he rests this evening. Claire thanked her quietly before hanging up. For a few seconds, she stood completely still beside the soda machine while the noise of the diner faded around her. Then slowly, almost against her own will, she opened her purse again. The wallet seemed heavier now, like it knew exactly what she was thinking. That thing must belong to somebody rich. Mia whispered suddenly beside her, nearly making Claire jump. Mia leaned against the counter and glanced toward the kitchen to make sure nobody was listening. Have you counted it yet? Claire shook her head immediately. No, you should. I am trying to return it. Mia stared at her in disbelief. Claire, listen to yourself. The universe finally throws you a lifeline, and you are trying to hand it back. Claire looked down at the floor. It is not mine. Mia folded her arms. Neither is homelessness. Those words hit harder than Claire expected. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Mia lowered her voice. Do you know what rich people call $8,000? Claire looked up silently. Lunch money. Claire wanted to disagree. She wanted to say honesty mattered more than money. But exhaustion made it difficult to think clearly anymore. She was tired of struggling. Tired of pretending everything would somehow work out. Tired of watching Noah smile through hardships no child should understand. After her shift started, Claire moved between tables like a machine, taking orders and refilling coffee while her thoughts stayed trapped inside her purse. Every time she heard a customer laugh about expensive vacations or weekend shopping trips, the pressure inside her chest grew worse. Then near the end of the night, while cleaning table 7, Claire finally made a decision. She pulled the wallet from her bag again and carefully searched for identification. A sleek black business card slid out onto the table. Ethan Carter, Carter Global Holdings. An address on Park Avenue. Claire stared at the name for several seconds. Then slowly, she looked back at the stack of money one more time before whispering words she was no longer sure she believed. Please do not make me regret this. By the time Claire finished her shift, rain had started pouring across the city in cold silver sheets that reflected the glow of traffic lights against the wet pavement. She tightened her thin coat around herself as she stepped outside the diner, exhaustion weighing on every movement. The black wallet remained inside her purse, untouched since she found the business card hours earlier. Ethan Carter. Even the name sounded powerful. The kind of man who probably lived in penthouses with heated floors and drivers waiting outside 24 hours a day. Claire could not even imagine that kind of life anymore. Her phone buzzed again just as she reached the subway entrance. Another message from her landlord. Final reminder. Payment due Friday by 9 a.m. Failure to comply will result in legal removal procedures. Claire stared at the screen until the words blurred slightly. She slipped the phone back into her pocket before taking a shaky breath. Then she looked toward the address printed on the business card. Park Avenue was nearly 40 minutes away from Queens in the opposite direction. She should have been heading home to Noah. She should have been trying to sleep before another double shift tomorrow. Instead, she found herself walking toward the uptown train platform almost without thinking. During the ride, Claire sat quietly near the window while rainwater streaked across the glass. Around her, passengers scrolled through phones or listened to music, completely disconnected from one another. Claire slowly opened the wallet again under the dim subway light. The cash still sat neatly stacked inside. Beside it was a black metal card with only one name engraved in silver letters. Ethan Carter. No bank logo. No numbers. Just the name alone. Claire frowned slightly. She had never seen a credit card like that before. Then her eyes drifted again toward the old photograph tucked behind the card slot. The little girl in the picture looked around 6 years old, smiling beside the older man in the navy suit. Claire studied the image for a moment before quietly whispering to herself, "Who are you?" 20 minutes later, the train emerged near Midtown East. Claire stepped onto the crowded sidewalk and immediately felt out of place. Luxury storefronts lined the streets. Men in tailored coats stepped out of black cars while women carrying designer handbags disappeared into glowing apartment towers. Everything around her looked polished, expensive, untouchable. Claire glanced down at her worn sneakers and suddenly considered turning around. But then she thought about Noah sleeping in their tiny apartment, unaware they might lose it within 2 days. She kept walking. Eventually, she stopped across the street from a towering glass building with gold letters near the entrance. Carter Global Holdings. Her stomach tightened immediately. Several luxury vehicles sat parked outside, while sharply dressed employees moved quickly through the lobby doors. Claire looked back at the wallet in disbelief. This was not just some wealthy businessman. This was billionaire-level money. She almost laughed at herself for even considering keeping it now. Security cameras watched every corner of the building. Men like Ethan Carter probably had accountants tracking missing paper clips. Claire took a nervous breath and crossed the street carefully through the rain. Before she reached the entrance, a black umbrella suddenly appeared above her head. She looked up in surprise. An older doorman stood beside her wearing gloves and a long gray coat. "Ma'am, can I help you?" he asked politely. Claire hesitated before pulling the wallet from her purse. "I think this belongs to someone here." The doorman's eyes widened slightly when he saw the name engraved on the card. "One moment, please." He immediately pressed an earpiece near his collar and spoke quietly while Claire stood awkwardly near the revolving doors. Inside the lobby, marble floors reflected enormous chandeliers overhead. Claire had never seen a place this luxurious up close before. A few employees glanced toward her briefly before continuing on. She suddenly became painfully aware of the rain dripping from her sleeves onto the polished floor. Then, after nearly a minute, the doorman looked back at her with a strange expression. "Mr. Carter would like to see you personally." Claire blinked in surprise. "Tonight?" "Yes, ma'am." He stepped aside toward the elevators. Top floor. Claire's heartbeat instantly doubled. Because suddenly, returning a lost wallet no longer felt simple anymore. Claire stepped into the elevator alone while the doors closed behind her with a soft metallic sound. The ride upward felt impossibly smooth, almost silent, as glowing floor numbers climbed higher and higher above Manhattan. She held the wallet tightly against her chest, suddenly wishing she had changed out of her diner uniform before coming here. Rainwater still dampened the edges of her sleeves, and her sneakers squeaked faintly against the polished elevator floor. Everything about this building reminded her she did not belong in it. When the elevator finally opened, Claire froze for a moment. The top floor looked more like a luxury hotel than an office. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the glowing city skyline, while soft jazz music played quietly somewhere in the background. The room smelled faintly of leather and expensive coffee. Near the windows, a man stood with his back turned toward her, one hand resting inside his pocket as he stared out over the city lights below. Even before he turned around, Claire somehow knew it was him. Ethan Carter looked different from the billionaire types she had imagined from magazines and television. He was dressed simply in a dark charcoal sweater with the sleeves rolled slightly above his wrists. No flashy watch, no arrogance in his posture, but there was still something unmistakably powerful about him. Calm, controlled. The kind of presence that made people lower their voices without realizing why. Ethan turned slowly toward her, his expression unreadable at first. Then his eyes drifted toward the wallet in her hands. "You found it," he said quietly. Claire nodded once and stepped forward carefully before holding it out to him. "I think this belongs to you." Ethan accepted the wallet slowly but did not open it immediately. Instead, he looked directly at her. Most people would not have returned it. Claire forced a small shrug even though her nerves were tightening by the second. "It did not belong to me." Ethan studied her face carefully, almost like he was trying to understand something deeper than her words. "You did not take anything?" Claire looked surprised by the question. "No." Ethan finally opened the wallet and glanced inside. The cash remained untouched. Every card exactly where it had been. For a brief second, something shifted in his expression. Not shock, not relief. Something closer to disbelief. "You never even called the number on the business card," he said. Claire frowned slightly. There was no phone number. Ethan looked down again. She was right. The card only displayed his name and company logo. Most people lied at that point. She had not. Silence settled between them for several long seconds while rain tapped softly against the massive windows behind him. Claire suddenly became aware of how late it was getting. Noah was probably waiting at their apartment with the babysitter downstairs. Well, she said awkwardly, I should probably go. Ethan looked at her again. You came all the way here in this weather to return a wallet filled with enough cash to change your situation. Claire's face tightened slightly. You do not know my situation. Ethan held her gaze calmly. Actually, I think I do. The words instantly made her uncomfortable. What does that mean? Ethan seemed to realize how it sounded and exhaled quietly before setting the wallet on his desk. I make it a habit to know who I am dealing with. Claire folded her arms instinctively. So you investigated me? Only enough to understand why someone in your position would still return it. Claire stared at him, unsure whether to feel insulted or embarrassed. Ethan stepped closer toward the window light, his voice remaining calm. 3 months behind on rent. Medical debt. 2 jobs. A son with asthma. Claire's chest tightened immediately. That is none of your business. No, Ethan admitted softly. But it became my business the moment you did something almost nobody else would have done. Claire looked away, suddenly angry at herself for feeling exposed. I did not return it because I am some amazing person. Her voice grew quieter. I almost kept it. Ethan said nothing. Claire swallowed hard before continuing. For 1 minute. I actually thought about it. Ethan's eyes never left her face. But you did not. Claire looked down toward the marble floor. I needed the money, she whispered honestly. I still do. For the first time that evening, Ethan Carter looked at her less like a stranger and more like someone whose pain he understood far too well. Then quietly, almost unexpectedly, he asked, When was the last time someone helped you, Claire? Claire did not answer Ethan's question right away. The silence between them stretched across the enormous office while rain continued sliding down the glass windows behind him. For a moment, she looked like someone trying to remember something distant. Then finally, she gave a small shake of her head. I do not know, she admitted quietly. Ethan watched her carefully. There was no self-pity in her voice. That was what surprised him most. Most people talked about hardship hoping someone would rescue them. Claire sounded almost uncomfortable discussing her struggles at all. She glanced toward the elevator again. I really should get home. Ethan nodded once, but before she could turn away, he reached into the wallet and removed the stack of cash. Claire immediately stiffened. What are you doing? Ethan held the money toward her calmly. Take it. Claire stared at him in disbelief. No, why not? Because it is yours. And you earned it. Claire shook her head immediately. Returning something does not mean I should get paid for it. Ethan almost smiled at that response, though there was sadness hidden underneath it. You are the first person who has said that. Claire frowned slightly. What does that mean? Ethan walked slowly toward the window overlooking Manhattan before answering. You were not the first person to find that wallet today. Claire blinked in confusion. Ethan continued quietly. I dropped it 3 different times. Claire stared at him. You tested people? I observed them. By tempting them with thousands of dollars? Ethan turned back toward her. Money reveals character faster than almost anything else. Claire crossed her arms tightly. That is a terrible thing to believe about people. Ethan gave a faint nod. Maybe, but experience taught me otherwise. Claire looked at the money still in his hand before speaking carefully. So what happened to the others? Ethan's expression remained calm, but colder now. One took the cash and threw the wallet in a trash can. Another returned it after removing several $100s. Claire looked away uneasily. Ethan stepped closer again. You brought it back untouched. I almost did not, Claire reminded him softly. Ethan studied her face for a moment. That is exactly why it matters. Claire did not understand what he meant by that, but before she could ask, her phone suddenly rang inside her purse. Her stomach tightened instantly when she saw the babysitter's number. I have to take this. She answered quickly. Hello. The babysitter sounded worried. Claire, Noah is having trouble breathing again. I think you should come home. Claire's face immediately drained of color. Did you use the inhaler? It barely helped. Claire grabbed her bag instantly. I am leaving right now. Ethan watched the panic flood her expression. What happened? Claire was already moving toward the elevator. My son. Ethan followed a few steps behind her. Do you need a car? I will take the subway. At this hour in the rain? I cannot afford. She stopped herself mid-sentence. Ethan pressed the elevator button calmly. Claire. She looked up at him. Let me help. Pride and exhaustion battled visibly across her face. Then another coughing sound echoed faintly through the phone from the babysitter's side of the call. That decided it. Claire closed her eyes briefly before whispering, "Okay." 10 minutes later, a black SUV sped through the rain toward Queens, while Claire sat rigidly in the back seat, clutching her phone. Ethan sat across from her in silence, watching the anxiety in her trembling hands. "How long has he had asthma?" he asked gently. "Since he was 4. Does he see a specialist?" Claire gave a humorless laugh under her breath. "Specialists cost money." Ethan looked out the rain-covered window thoughtfully. "You should not have to choose between rent and your child's health." Claire stared ahead without answering, because after years of struggling alone, she no longer believed the world cared about choices like that. But as the SUV pulled deeper into Queens, Ethan realized something unsettling. For the first time in years, he genuinely wanted to change someone's life. And that terrified him almost as much as it did her. The black SUV finally pulled up beside a narrow apartment building in Queens just after 10:30 at night. Rainwater streamed down the cracked windows, while flickering hallway lights glowed weakly behind stained curtains. Ethan stepped out first and looked up at the aging brick building in silence. It was smaller and more worn down than he expected. Paint peeled near the entrance door, and several mailboxes hung crooked against the wall. Claire barely waited for the driver to open her door before hurrying inside. "Third floor," she called back breathlessly. Ethan followed several steps behind as they climbed the narrow staircase. The hallway smelled faintly of old carpet and radiator heat. Somewhere nearby, a television played loudly behind a closed apartment door while pipes rattled softly inside the walls. Claire reached apartment 3B and quickly unlocked the door. The moment she stepped inside, she heard Noah coughing. The sound instantly changed her entire expression. Fear replaced exhaustion in seconds. "Mom." Noah's weak voice came from the couch. Claire rushed toward him immediately. Ethan stopped quietly near the doorway, unsure whether to enter further. Noah sat wrapped in a faded blue blanket, his small chest rising unevenly as he struggled through shallow breaths. A woman in her 60s stood nearby holding a glass of water. "I tried the inhaler again," the babysitter explained nervously. "It helped for a few minutes. Then the coughing came back." Claire knelt beside Noah and brushed damp hair gently away from his forehead. "Hey, baby," she whispered softly, forcing calm into her voice. "I am here." Noah looked up tiredly. "I am sorry, Mom." Claire's face tightened immediately. "No, sweetheart. Do not say that." Ethan remained still near the kitchen entrance, watching the scene unfold quietly. The apartment itself was painfully modest. Tiny kitchen, worn furniture, water stains near the ceiling. Yet despite everything, the place felt warm in a way Ethan's penthouse never had. Family drawings covered one wall beside Noah's school certificates. A half-finished science project sat near the television. Claire turned toward the babysitter. "Thank you for staying late, Mrs. Green." The older woman nodded kindly before finally noticing Ethan standing near the doorway. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. Claire looked back awkwardly. "This is Ethan. He gave me a ride home." Ethan offered a polite nod. Mrs. Green studied him for a moment before quietly gathering her purse. "Well," she said carefully, "I am glad she did not come home alone this late." After the babysitter left, silence settled over the apartment except for Noah's breathing. Claire searched the kitchen drawer quickly before pulling out an almost empty inhaler. Her face fell immediately. Ethan noticed. "How long until the refill?" Claire avoided his eyes. "Tomorrow morning." Ethan looked at the nearly empty medicine canister in her hand. "And if his breathing gets worse tonight?" Claire did not answer. She already knew the answer. Emergency rooms meant bills she could not pay. Noah suddenly looked toward Ethan curiously from the couch. "Are you rich?" Claire's eyes widened instantly. "Noah." But Ethan surprised her by laughing softly under his breath. "Why would you ask that?" Noah shrugged beneath the blanket. "You look like people in the commercials my mom skips." Claire covered her face briefly in embarrassment. Ethan smiled faintly for the first time all evening. "Your son is very observant." Noah looked at him carefully again. "Mom says rich people are usually busy." Claire blinked in surprise. "I never said that. You did last month when you missed movie night." Claire's expression quietly broke for just a second. Ethan noticed immediately. Noah continued innocently. "You said rich bosses make people stay late." The room fell silent after that. Claire lowered her eyes while guilt washed across her exhausted face. Ethan glanced around the tiny apartment once more before looking back at her. Suddenly, his billion-dollar office felt very far away. Then Noah started coughing again, harder this time. Claire rushed beside him instantly, trying to calm his breathing while hiding the panic in her own eyes. Ethan watched her trembling hands carefully, and in that moment, he realized something that unsettled him deeply. Claire Bennett had spent so long surviving alone that she no longer knew how to ask for help, even when she desperately needed it. Claire sat beside Noah on the couch for nearly 20 minutes, gently rubbing his back while his breathing slowly steadied again. The apartment had grown quieter now except for the rain tapping softly against the windows and the occasional rumble of traffic outside. Ethan remained near the kitchen doorway, giving them space even though his attention never fully left the little boy struggling to rest beneath the blanket. Finally, Noah's coughing eased enough for his eyes to begin drifting closed. Claire carefully adjusted the blanket around him before lowering her voice to a whisper. "Try to sleep, okay?" Noah nodded weakly. "Will you still be here when I wake up?" Claire forced a soft smile. "Always." A few minutes later, after Noah finally fell asleep, Claire walked slowly into the kitchen area and leaned against the counter with visible exhaustion. Ethan quietly stepped closer. "He should see a doctor tonight." Claire rubbed her forehead tiredly. "I know. Then why are we still here?" Claire let out a shaky breath before answering. "Because hospitals do not stop sending bills just because you cannot pay them." Ethan looked at her carefully. "Claire, I already owe thousands." Her voice cracked slightly despite trying to stay composed. Every visit becomes another letter in the mail, another warning, another collection notice. Ethan stayed silent while she continued staring down at the chipped kitchen counter. "At some point," she whispered, "you stop asking for help because help always comes with another bill attached to it." Those words hit Ethan harder than he expected. For years, he had spent money without thinking twice about it. Private jets, luxury hotels, multi-million-dollar negotiations over dinner tables covered in food nobody finished. Yet standing inside Claire's tiny apartment, hearing her quietly calculate whether her son could afford to breathe comfortably tonight, made something inside him feel deeply wrong. Then suddenly, a loud knock echoed through the apartment. Claire's entire body stiffened immediately. "Who was that?" Ethan asked quietly. Claire already knew. She walked toward the door slowly and opened it halfway. Her landlord stood outside holding a clipboard beneath the dim hallway light. "Evening, Claire." His tone was not cruel, but it carried the cold detachment of someone used to delivering bad news. "I just wanted to remind you about Friday morning." Claire lowered her eyes. "I know." The landlord glanced past her shoulder briefly toward the apartment. "I also need to inform you that legal paperwork has already been filed." Claire swallowed hard. "Please, I just need a little more time. I gave you 3 extra months." Then his eyes shifted toward Ethan standing in the kitchen. The landlord's expression changed slightly after noticing the expensive coat and polished shoes. "Oh," he said carefully, "I did not realize you had company." Claire looked embarrassed instantly. "He is just leaving." Ethan stepped forward calmly before Claire could say anything else. "How much does she owe?" Claire turned sharply toward him. "Ethan, no." The landlord blinked in surprise. "About 11,000 with late fees." Ethan nodded once. "I will cover it." Claire stared at him in complete shock. "No." Ethan looked at her calmly. "Your son needs stability more than you need pride." Her face flushed instantly. "You cannot just solve everything with money." Ethan's expression softened slightly. "No, but sometimes money solves the problem, keeping good people trapped." The hallway fell silent. Even the landlord seemed unsure what to say anymore. Claire folded her arms tightly, fighting emotions she no longer knew how to control. "Why are you doing this?" she asked quietly. Ethan looked toward the sleeping little boy on the couch before answering. "Because kindness should not come with punishment." Claire felt tears sting her eyes immediately, but she looked away before they could fall. For years she had carried every burden alone, convinced nobody would ever step in without expecting something in return. Yet Ethan Carter stood inside her tiny apartment offering help with no contract, no manipulation, no demand attached to it. And somehow, that scared her almost more than losing everything. The landlord stood awkwardly in the hallway for another few seconds before Ethan calmly reached into his coat pocket and handed him a business card. "Contact my office tomorrow morning," Ethan said evenly. "The balance will be handled." The landlord looked down at the card, and the moment he read the name, His expression changed completely. "You are Ethan Carter?" Ethan gave a small nod. The man straightened immediately, almost stunned. I had no idea." Claire watched the exchange in silence, confusion slowly mixing with disbelief across her face. The landlord quickly cleared his throat and looked toward her again. "Well, Miss Bennett, obviously there is no need to worry tonight." He suddenly sounded far kinder than before. "Take care of your son." Then he quietly left. The apartment door closed softly behind him. For several moments, neither Claire nor Ethan spoke. The rain outside had finally started easing, leaving only the faint sound of dripping water against the fire escape. Claire looked down at the business card still sitting on the kitchen counter. Carter Global Holdings. Suddenly, the expensive office, the black SUV, the security team, all of it made sense. "You are really him," she whispered. Ethan leaned lightly against the counter. "I suppose so." Claire gave a nervous laugh under her breath. "I thought you were just some wealthy executive. That would have been easier." Claire looked at him carefully now, like she was seeing him for the first time all over again. "Why would someone like you spend time testing strangers on the street?" Ethan stayed quiet for a moment before answering. "Because after a while, you stop knowing who actually sees you as a person." Claire frowned slightly. Ethan looked toward the sleeping boy on the couch. "People see the money first. The companies. The headlines. The opportunities." His voice softened slightly. "You were the first person in years who handed something back without asking for anything in return." Claire lowered her eyes. "I almost kept it. But you did not." Ethan stepped closer toward the small living room and glanced around at the worn furniture, the school drawings taped to the wall, and the patched-up bookshelf near the window. "The world has clearly not been kind to you," he said quietly. "Yet somehow, you still chose honesty." Claire crossed her arms tightly, emotions building again behind her eyes. "Honesty does not pay rent." Ethan looked back at her. "No, but it says something about who you are when life gives you every reason to stop caring." Claire did not know how to answer that. For years, she had felt invisible. Just another exhausted single mother trying to survive New York one paycheck at a time. Nobody ever stopped to ask whether she was okay. Nobody noticed when she skipped meals so Noah could eat better. Nobody cared when she worked double shifts while sick because missing one day meant losing electricity. But somehow, one simple decision on a rainy sidewalk had changed everything. Noah stirred slightly beneath the blanket and opened his eyes halfway. "Mom." Claire immediately walked over beside him. "I am here." Noah blinked sleepily before looking toward Ethan again. "Is the rich guy still here?" Ethan laughed softly under his breath while Claire shook her head in embarrassment. "Yes," she admitted quietly, brushing Noah's hair back gently. Noah looked at Ethan carefully. "Did Mom help you?" Ethan met the little boy's eyes for a moment before answering. "Yeah, she did." Noah smiled weakly. "She helps everybody." Claire looked away quickly before emotion could fully reach her face. Ethan watched her in silence for several seconds. Then slowly, he reached into his coat and removed the thick stack of cash from the wallet one final time before placing it gently on the kitchen table. Claire looked up immediately. "Ethan, this is not charity," he interrupted softly. "Consider it a thank you from someone who almost forgot good people still exist." Claire stared at the money, then back at him. "I do not know what to say." Ethan glanced once more toward the sleeping child beside her. "You already said enough the moment you chose to return that wallet." Then for the first time in a very long time, Claire Bennett felt something she had nearly forgotten existed. Hope.